YouTube is full of videos of the Mythological ritual event, each with equally large time commitments stated in their titles, but is it actually worth it? To answer this, we need to compare the entry requirements to the loot, advantageous factors and problems with each strategy, and actually use a sensible timescale. So here is my comprehensive guide to the Diana event. Let's start with equipment. I'm going to be using a melee setup because unless you have 2.2 billion coins to spare or want to buy an overpriced golden spoon, it's the only viable option. For armour, I would recommend a Warden helmet, and either Crimson or Necron armour. It is possible without a Warden helmet if your Crimson is good enough, or you have really good connection, but I still wouldn't advise it. If you don't have this, or a more expensive alternative, I'd recommend finding another money making method until then, as pretty much everything else is better than using an epic griffin. Okay, so we already have pretty big entry costs in armour, but what about a weapon? Well, these guys have a lot of health, and only get harder the longer they survive, so high damage is required. Anything less than 300,000 damage per hit would be difficult, but perhaps possible with some assistance from other players or techniques. But a weapon like a Yeti sword, giant sword, or the intended Daedalus axe will be sufficient. As with any weapon, you can go down two routes with enchantments. One for all, or literally everything else. I prefer the latter because then I don't have to switch weapons to apply looting, but one for all is generally better for damage. And that's it for the basics, but there are a few other things on my hotbar. Melee is good for these stats, but not so much these. Speed is easy to fix by increasing intelligence, as you can just rely on teleporting more. And besides, there's no practical way of getting speed above 200 with a Warden helmet equipped. So how do we increase intelligence? Well, if you're not one of the people in Party Finder, it should be pretty simple. Soulflow. Soulflow's main use is for Enderman Slayer, but it can also be used anywhere for a bunch of overflow mana, which can be regenerated very quickly using a Gloomlock, Grimoire, and Soulflow battery. It does have a few requirements and a bit of cost, but it's definitely worth it for the convenience. Now for a few miscellaneous stats. Ferocity, attack speed, and commonly regarded as the most important, fishing speed. Don't worry, I'll explain why in a minute. Attack speed is important to deal damage quickly and keep mobs from hitting you. It is pretty easy to increase, just put your talisman power on Itchy. You can also spec into more if you want, but about 50 is good enough. And 82 is the same as max. Ferocity is more difficult and expensive to gain. I would recommend just ignoring it for the most part, unless you want to build around it. Just remember to eat the Century Cake that gives a couple bonus, and activate the handy Blood Chalice artifact for 20 whilst in combat. Okay, and now for the last one, which you somehow actually believe is fishing speed for a minute. Magic Find. For this you can use pet rules that switch to a Golden Dragon or Black Cat on mob kill, Sora armour, or a very expensive helmet and a Divine Gift enchant. Most people have neither the funds nor skill to switch armour sets mid-fight, so in my tests I'll ignore it, but keep in mind that it can drastically increase profits. Now for items. Equipment is quite expensive to upgrade and relatively minor, but just ensure that the Reforge isn't something like Strengthened for a bit of extra damage. Healing items such as the Gloomlock Grimoire, Wand of Atonement, Overflux Power Orb, Ornate Zombie Sword, and even a Hyperion, or one of its varieties if you can afford it, are useful for staying alive in tricky situations, such as these things. I hate them. Slowness potions or the Fire 3 staff can be used to stop a mob from moving, which is particularly useful considering the speed at which they run. However, ensure that you don't combo them too hard, else they'll call on the power of Zeus to resolve their skill issue. But I believe that does it for requirements, other than obvious things such as combat, hot potato books, basic enchantments, etc. So after collecting all these things, what can you actually get? You can find a full list on the wiki, but here are the most notable drops. Assuming you're using a legendary griffin, digging up treasure burrows has a 2 in 3 chance of dropping griffin feathers, worth between 100 and 150,000 coins. Up to 750,000 raw coins, or, incredibly rarely, a Crown of Greed or washed up souvenir, worth 1 million and 400,000 coins respectively. However, it's the mobs that are actually most lucrative. Excluding the Minus Hunter and Inquisitor, each have a 0.25% chance of dropping a Dwarf Turtle Helmet, Crochet Tiger Plushie, or Antique Remedies. Tiger Plushies and Remedies are worth very little, so I've never worried about selling them. The Shelmets are worth about 1 million coins, or more if you wait a bit before selling. Now for the rare things, the Daedalus Stick, Minos Relic, and Chimera Book. Daedalus Sticks have a 0.08% chance of dropping from Minotaurs, and are worth about 20 million each. They are the main component of crafting the Daedalus Axe, so it might be worth saving a couple if you don't already have it. The Minos Relic is a 0.02% drop from a Minos champion, and worth about 70 million. They were previously the best item for the Mushroom Cow pet, but are still good in certain setups. Now the most well-known reward, the Chimera Book, is one of the best ultimate enchants in the game and can only be dropped from the hardest mob in the event, Inquisitors. It has a drop chance of 1% and sells for upwards of 100 million. All drop chances are subject to change depending on your magic find, but you can use the calculator on the Skyblock wiki to work out your chances. Now we need to decide how long to test. Returning to the most reputable source of information, the Hypixel forums, I have massively extrapolated the data of this forum post and decided that all players average an hour to an hour and a half on Skyblock per day. So, over the next 7.5 hours, I'll be trying not to die to Gaia constructs. Here's a montage of the notable loot. And that's 7.5 hours, and this is what we got. 4 turtle shellmets, a lot of coins, a crown of greed, 274 griffin feathers, a lot of ancient claws, a chimera book, and we won't talk about the other stuff. Quick note on ancient claws, make sure to sell them as the unenchanted version, as they sell for a lot more overall for some reason. So let's tally up the profits. Shellmets total to 6.4 million, random coins total approximately to 3.5 million, roughly 2 million in ancient claws, 68.2 million in griffin feathers, 1 million for the crown of greed, 98 million for chimera, and we'll call this another million, for a total profit of 180 million, or 24 million an hour. That's not bad, but massively boosted by the chimera book. Without it, the profits are decreased to only 11 million coins an hour, which is roughly comparable to grinding zealots or ghosts. This isn't very good, but assuming we do factor in the chimera book, Diana is still worse than ruby routing, master mode dungeons, and armadillo mining, which each make closer to 30 million coins an hour. So is it worth it? Well, the stats say no, but your profits are directly correlated with your magic find, so it can be upgraded to rival some of the aforementioned methods. It's still not the best, but very good at entry level, and still not a waste of time at endgame, especially as some of the items are very useful, and you'll have to participate in multiple events to maximise the Skyblock XP you get from killing mythological mobs. So you might as well give it a try. If you're not going to touch real grass, you might as well do it in the Skyblock hub. Thanks for watching, and good luck. As you can probably infer from what has become of my yearly upload schedule, this video took a bit of time to make, so if you would consider subscribing, that would be very much appreciated. See ya.